Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, 1 out of every 5 juvenile offenders recidivate within 2 years. What can be done to halt the slide back into crime? Then President Obama has announced a carbon reduction initiative that has the coal industry concerned. Back with that and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back. Well, as we move into the summer, we're going to take up a whole bunch of additional topics. We're going to move away from the politics and the discussion of the budget. One of the things that I wanted to do for the longest time is to talk about a report on from the Juvenile Court Judges Commission that deals with the recidivism rate. I have a guest today, Keith Snyder. He's the Deputy Director of the Juvenile Court Judges Commission, and Justine Fowler, who's the Program Analyst with the same commission. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, look, when I read this commission report, I was sort of stunned at the recidivism rate. And I know you're all working hard to prevent, additional crime. Let me start with you, Keith. What brought this commission about?
All right, the report was established to set a benchmark for recidivism rates across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And the reason we're setting a benchmark is because we're going to try to reduce recidivism rates over the next 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years. So the benchmark came out at 20% as a statewide recidivism rate. And what we're doing now is implementing what we're calling evidence-based practices around the Commonwealth to have a smarter way of doing business with juvenile offenders across the state. One of the areas that we're trying to implement is a risk-need assessment instrument, where we're identifying kids' risk to reoffend, and we're also identifying those criminogenic needs that the kids have in order to address them to reduce recidivism.
Now, I was sort of stunned by these major findings. I mean, 80% of repeat offenders, come from what you all have called disruptive families. I mean, we knew that you need fathers, and you need whatever the family is, blended or otherwise. We don't care about that. But talk a little bit about these findings that I think everybody should be aware of.
Sure, and like you said, from the beginning, we presumed that we would find that the family structure would probably have an impact on recidivism rates, but now we have the statewide data that illustrates that for us. But this is what we've known all along, that family and family involvement plays a huge role in not only whether juveniles come into the juvenile justice system, but whether or not they continue to keep coming back. So fortunately, if we talk about what it is that we're trying to do with this, we currently have a statewide initiative called the Family Involvement Committee that works solely on getting families involved with the juveniles while they're involved with the juvenile justice system, and then hopefully to help strengthen those families once they leave our system and go back, return to the families. Yeah,
one of the other findings, and I don't think, some of this surprised me, but what didn't surprise me is the relationship between drug offenders and property offenders. You say here are most likely to commit the same types of crimes when they reoffend. But I was sort of surprised about property. I understood drugs. Is that because the need to get things, whether it's rob cell phones or... Go ahead, take it away, Keith.
I think one of the things that the report does, it asks as many questions as it gives us answers. So that's a good question. And so you have kids who are out, if they tend to burglarize a home, they would tend to do a similar crime in the future. Yeah. So what's important is for us to identify what the kids are doing and then to address those needs in their communities.
Yeah. One of the things that sort of strikes me as difficult to understand, and we were joking about, it's a serious subject, but all these words like recidivism and recidivate, I mean, things that you all are familiar with that many of our viewers might not be. What's your definition of recidivism?
The definition that we adopted in Pennsylvania was within 2 years of case closure, a subsequent adjudication of delinquency or conviction in criminal court for either a felony or misdemeanor offense. And for those who may not be familiar with the juvenile justice terminology, an adjudication of delinquency is essentially the same thing as a finding of guilt in criminal court. And just as a real quick side note, there really is no nationally accepted definition of recidivism. So when Pennsylvania decided to do a recidivism study, we were really free to choose whatever definition that we wanted to. So we reached out to juvenile justice experts in criminal criminologists and key stakeholders from across the state to help us develop this definition.
Okay, let's run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about not so much the methodology, but I'm still want to get into the sort of the major findings and what is it that our guests think are the key elements to reducing this rate and to getting young folks back on the right track. We'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, educating citizens and business leaders about important public policy issues and civic affairs. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, I'm chatting with Keith Snyder and Justine Fowler from the Juvenile Court Judges Commission. We're chatting about recidivism rate, and these folks are working hard to try to do something about it. One of the things I noticed, Keith, in the information that you all sent me, very helpful to get a better understanding of this, was you're not in this alone. I mean, you have a whole variety of partners in that. Talk about those partners just for a minute. I think that's important to get more people actively engaged in this. Go ahead.
No, we do. Our primary constituency is juvenile court judges from around the state. So one of the functions of the Juvenile Court Judges Commission staff is to advise juvenile court judges on matters pertaining to both dependent and delinquent children.
Right.
But we work with district attorneys, with public defenders. We work very closely with the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency and with the Pennsylvania Council of Chief Juvenile Probation Officers.
One of the things, Justine, that, as a teacher virtually all my life, I know we drag something else into the schools, and they'll go, no, gee, can you ask us to do something else? Have any relationship with schools? I always, a lot of teachers act as mentors, act as, I don't mean this in the wrong way, sort of surrogate parents in some families. I'm sure you've run into this. Any connection eventually, you think, with schools to get them to buy into it? I know schools are deeply concerned about, attendance and food and nutrition programs.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the PACT initiative and whether that kind of ties into what he's...
Yeah, well, to answer your question directly, we do have a lot of involvement with the schools. And the way juvenile justice is implemented around the state is at a local level. So each county has their own juvenile court. Each county has their own juvenile probation office. And those probation officers go into schools on a daily basis to supervise the kids who are on probation. But I know the teachers have their hands full these days with a lot of problems in the classroom. Kids with mental health problems, kids with substance abuse problems, and we often interact with them on a daily basis. Yeah.
All right. Again, back to are there any major findings that we didn't talk about at the beginning that you could mention that you might find important to note?
Sure. I think another one of the more major findings that we found was that the age at the onset of crime certainly has an effect on whether or not a juvenile is going to be... The age at the onset of crime, meaning the first time the juvenile commits an offense. And we found that the younger an individual is, when they begin committing crimes, the more likely they are to be a recidivist.
I'm going to get shocked by this question. How old would you say is the average? Is it dropping? Younger? Would you say?
We see an increase as kids get older. Crime increases.
But at what age do you begin?
You can be 10. At the age you can be adjudicated delinquent. So
we've seen kids younger than that committing offenses. They just cannot be under the juvenile court jurisdiction until the age of 10.
So that's a bad sign. If you have a 10-year-old who's continually in trouble, schools are having difficulties, parents are having difficulties, that's a bad sign. So if we can identify those kids at that age and provide services to them, hopefully we can stop that trajectory.
Yeah. I'm actually, I'm not stunned. There's a part of me because, you get a sense about it in just what you read or learn a little bit in families, but boy, that's chilling.
Yeah, there aren't many, but it's a bad sign.
I got it. All right, where does all this go? Future recidivism study, where does all this go?
Sure. So as Keith mentioned, kind of one of the biggest things that we're focusing on doing is making sure that we identify the risk and need levels of the individuals who come into our system and really target resources to help address those risks and needs to help decrease recidivism. So that's what, in the immediate future, that's what we're focusing on right now.
Yeah.
In terms of future recidivism studies, we're certainly going to continue to analyze the same type of data that we have here, but we'll also be able to start looking at the outcomes of risk assessment, the risk assessment scores, and how recidivism rates are impacted.
Yeah. Are there, do you need legislative help? I mean, are the laws, and I mean, you work with this all the time, are there the policy implications are big? I mean, I know from the stuff you sent me, you're talking about targeting medium and high risk offenders. That obviously makes sense. Is there something that that government ought to be doing to assist?
I think we have a pretty good relationship with both the governor's office and the legislature. In fact, in the governor's budget that was just signed into law, we got an extra $2.5 million to help implement this system enhancement strategy statewide. So the legislature obviously was on board with that as well. I think one of the biggest practical implications of this study is that we're able to identify serious, chronic, and violent kids based on the data that we have. So, and county probation departments can now identify those kids and provide services to them. That's how you reduce recidivism rates. So that's a real practical implication of the recidivism study.
All right, Keith, I'll give you the last word now. Something new, or you get some information that you think can be helpful to the folks out there. Give me come back on the show. We'll get you back and have you get into some of the details with it. Thanks for coming on the program. All right, as I indicated before, we have new carbon reduction initiatives outlined by President Obama. We're going to hear from the representative from the coal industry all through the summer. We'll get a variety of viewpoints. We'll make sure we get the environmental point of view. All of that following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back. Well, as I indicated earlier, President Obama has announced a carbon reduction initiative that certainly has the coal industry around the country and in our state concerned. We're going to do a series of programs on on energy-related subjects. John Pippy joins me. Senator John Pippy was in the Pennsylvania Senate. He's now the CEO of the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. Senator, thanks for coming on the program.
Terry, thanks so much for having me.
All right, well, let's talk about this. Tell me about just review for our viewers, if you will, what the president said first, and then we'll get to the reaction. What did the president actually say in terms of his initiative?
Well, during the president's speech recently, he talked about the need to reduce carbon emissions. He talked about global leadership, and he talked about how steps we can take today will have an impact on future generations. Where we have a significant disagreement with him is we believe the steps he is proposing, unilateral disarmament, economic disarmament for our country, would have a tremendous economic and social impact with very little environmental impact. And what I mean by that is, he is specifically, because of politics, targeted the coal industry. Mm-hmm. Coal's going to be the #1 source of energy for the world by 2017. That's not me saying it. That's the International Energy Agency, IEA. And so for the president to basically propose regulations that would result in the closure of over 230 coal plants, and most importantly, prohibit the building of new coal-fired power plants. That's what we believe will have a tremendous impact on the economy.
Let's now turn to our state.
Yep.
Pennsylvania, big coal-producing state. Always, it's been that way since the late 19th century. What impact would this have on our state?
Oh, tremendous impact. We'd look at a couple $2 billion. Coal as a whole has about a $7 billion positive impact in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's from the Economy League. If you implement the President's proposals at a minimum, you would see a third of that go away, over $2.5 billion. We have about 41,000 jobs associated with the coal industry. Take a third of those away, so 10,000 to 15,000 jobs. Most importantly, though, it's not just the coal industry, it's the consumer. They're paying higher electricity rates. It's the manufacturer now paying more per kilowatt hour and the cost of the goods and services we enjoy. So that's when I say, people use the term war on coal. I don't say that anymore.
Right.
Because it's really, the issue is the coal industry is integrated into our economy. It's integrated into the way of life in Western PA. And so any type of process that would shut that down would be, frankly, a war on the consumer.
Yeah, the other thing that gets pointed out is that coal is important in terms of the overall energy picture.
Yes.
I guess producing electricity, which a lot of, obviously, pretty important. Talk about that relationship.
Well, here in the Pennsylvania, coal, last year, provided about 42% of our electricity. In the heyday, it was over 50%, but we've had a growth in natural gas, which is good for the consumer. So we've seen a somewhat reduction in coal, but we're also seeing a tick back towards coal because as the temperatures heat up and the economy starts to come back a little, the cost of energy goes up, and coal's the most reliable and low cost we have available to us.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about the environmental reasons. I mean, I hear the president not to get into what the president thinks because we're trying to get your reaction to it. We'll get reaction from some other folks later. Clean coal, well, he was for clean coal. Then some folks say there's no such thing as clean coal. Well, I want to get your view on that and the environmental, and then we can talk about the impact on competitiveness. And we'll do that soon.
Great.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Welcome back. I'm talking to former Senator John Pippy. He now represents the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. We're going to do a bunch of energy-related shows over the course of the summer, getting a variety of views on energy. Pennsylvania is a huge energy producing state. It's very important. We also have to get the environmental aspect of this right as well. Senator, let's turn to the environmental issues. Clean coal, I have friends who will come to me and say there's no such thing as clean coal. What's your response to that?
Well, I think that if they say that, they're ignoring technology. They're ignoring the fact that a coal plant built today will be 90% more have 90% less emissions than one that was built in the 60s and 70s. I think that what they will focus on carbon or CO2 when the legacy has been always about particulates, SOx and NOx, those type of issues. Right. So I think there's actually a disconnect in what people are discussing. Mm-hmm. I'm an environmental engineer. I got that degree in the early 90s from West Point, first class to ever have environmental engineering, because I believe through technology we can make the world a better place. I still believe that now.
Yeah. What about the the goal of zero emissions from coal? Say something about that.
The issue is we can get there. In Western Pennsylvania, we have 2 of the research labs. NETL, the National Technology Lab, as well as CONSOL has its own research lab, and they spend about $500 million a year doing research. We're close to the point where by 2025, 2030, we can have zero emissions coal, carbon capture and sequestration. It will hopefully be commercially viable. The issue we have as an industry isn't that we want them to roll back regulation or eliminate regulation. What we're saying is treat us like you're treating the car industry. Give us time to get to, if cars are saying by 2025 you'll have double the mileage, let the coal industry reach there. We should be building new plants and getting rid of the older plants that had more emissions. But every time we try to improve a plant or build a new plant to replace an old technology, we get sued by the environmental side, and they say, no, we don't want coal at all. Yeah. And that just doesn't make sense because the rest of the world will have coal as the number one source in 2017.
Yeah, I was going to raise this question about competitiveness with particularly with China and India and other developing companies. Go ahead.
Well, it was great. There's a lot of what the president said recently was good about efficiencies, improving performance, reducing the waste energy, whether it be on mileage in vehicles or residential and commercial properties. He also talked about how great China was in increasing their renewables, and he's right. They are looking at solar and wind just as we can in our country. Mm-hmm. What he didn't mention was the part that really frustrates me as a coal guy, is that the world is going to build 1,200 new coal plants. China and India are going to build 3/4 of those. Their portfolio has 80% coal. In the U.S., we're at 50. They're growing tremendously. We're not. So to shut down our coal side, all it will do is have a tremendous negative impact economically. But the IEA and all the experts say if you had zero emissions, not just in coal, but in the entire United States, you would have less than an 0.08% impact on the actual global climate change.
Well, all that said, what would you want? If John Pippy could go to Washington and say, do Mr. President, here's what I want you to do, what would you tell him?
I'd say, Mr. President, you've talked so much about everyone coming together. I would say bring all the stakeholders together, the industry, but also the environmentalists and also the consumers and the business sector. Look at the best available technology now. Require us to use best available technology, have a permitting system that lets industry invest in the best available technology, and then set standards just like you are with the automobile industry that has us reaching a goal by 2025 and 2030 of zero emissions. We can get there. The problem is what they're proposing now shuts down any new coal and also gets rid of about half of the old stuff.
And we have about 45 seconds left. Is there... The president apparently does have a lot of authority to do what he's doing under regulatory, and he doesn't need statutory help. He can do it under is that right?
They have used the court system to give them a lot more authority than what our elected officials would argue they should have.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on. We're in this program. We're interested in everybody's viewpoint. You expressed the viewpoint of the coal industry quite well. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.